tons of news to talk about today, but we need to start with the fact that there are now hints of 100% tariffs on chips from Taiwan. But it is also important to note that this is in the context of this exact quote. The incentive is going to be they're not going to want to pay a 25, 50, or even 100% tax. That is a direct quote from Donald Trump. So he is threatening up to a 100% tariff. Although he also mentions 25 or 50%. So how extreme this is still up in the air. Exactly when this is implemented is still up in the air. But the point is that tariffs on chips from Taiwan will directly impact graphics card pricing because graphics card chips are produced in Taiwan. Even Intel, who has United States foundries, doesn't use their foundries for their graphics cards. TSMC just has a process advantage for that type of chip, and they are using them. So I don't want to get into a big political commentary whether or not you think this is a good or bad thing for domestic chip manufacturing in the United States is not the point of this video. I report on graphics card news, especially pricing, availability, what's a good deal, and this could have a massive impact on that. Do keep in mind, though, that these tariffs are not currently in place, and the way tariffs work is the importing business into the United States. So like the US company importing it into the country pays the tax. So if it was, for example, a 100% tariff, that would mean that the price of that chip is doubled when imported into the United States. And then so when that company then has to price it when selling it to consumers, they're going to want to protect their profit margins, so they will likely have to increase their pricing on their product in order to maintain their profit margins, and that means the end product costs more for the consumer. However, if it's just on the chip, for example, rather than the entire graphics card, it's not necessarily a doubling of the price of the card. And all of that, but there's, even if we, and also I guess I should say the 50 series launching in 2 days would not have paid this tariff because first of all, it's not in place yet. And second of all, even if it goes into place like now, that the cards that are already in the United States, if they've already been imported, they would not be affected by this tariff. It's later on, if this gets implemented and then chips are imported, that this would then hit. So it's possible that 50 series pricing could increase over time on the actual market well beyond the MSRP, which was set before this tariff. But again, this tariff is not yet official, but it is direct from Donald Trump that he wants a 25 or 50 or 100% tariff on chips from Taiwan. Now, even if we ignore those tariffs, there's a bunch of other signs that 50 series pricing and availability might not be amazing. We have MSI themselves saying that their US launch of their 5090s will be delayed to February 6th due to availability problems. All my sources will be linked in the video description. And again, a big part of pricing on the real market, regardless of MSRP, is supply and demand. So if there's not great supply, then it's possible that pricing shoots up. So that's not great, especially when there's no card directly competing with the 5090 in terms of performance. It is the most powerful graphics card, so there's nothing else to directly, just like there's no AMD version that you could buy instead at a lower price, that kind of thing. Additionally, Nvidia themselves have a post about 50 series availability on their forum with an Nvidia representative specifically saying, "We expect significant demand for the 5090 and 5080 and believe stockouts may happen. Nvidia and our partners are shipping more stock to retail every day to help get GPUs into the hands of gamers." But again, that's Nvidia themselves saying that availability might not be good. Additionally, when it comes to pricing, there's the MSRP, but then there's what do AIB partners actually price their cards at? Because AIB partners have been quoted as saying that MSRP feels like charity. That doesn't mean they feel like, consumers should just feel so gracious that they're getting this charitable gift of these MSRPs. What they're talking about is AIB partners like MSI, Gigabyte, Asus, all of them have to buy chips from Nvidia, and Nvidia sets that price. So then Nvidia also gives the suggested MSRP, but what if there's not a lot of wiggle room between what board partners pay for the chip and the suggested MSRP, and they still have to produce their whole cooler design and actually make a profit. So what they're saying here is they don't feel like there's much profit margin left for them if they try to price at MSRP. So, are we going to get a whole bunch of cards listed well above MSRP? Gigabyte, for example, has their cards listed on Best Buy right now for their 5080s, and we're seeing $1,000 models, which is MSRP, but we're seeing other models up to about $1,400. Here's that screenshot. Again, all my sources will be linked in the video description. But the question then comes in when we're talking about supply. So how many of the MSRP models are they going to make if they feel like that's charity, they're just giving them away without any real profit margin? Or are they going to produce a lot more of these $1,200, $1,300, or $1,400 models? As the end user, you could try to vote with your wallet and not buy the models above MSRP. That can help. And I think that's kind of what worked with the 4080 series, where it started at a $1,200 MSRP, but a lot of all the evidence that we have suggests it wasn't selling super well for an 80 class Nvidia product, which probably is why Nvidia launched the 4080 Super with basically the same performance, tiny single-digit percentage differences for $200 less. A year later. It was effectively just admitting they had overpriced what the market was willing to bear for a 4080. That being said, in the context of the 40 series, the 90 class product had a $1,600 MSRP. So when you have a $1,200 80 class and a $1,600 90 class, then if you start to get the board partner models in there, it's not a big jump to just buy the 90 class instead. Whereas they've fixed that problem from their perspective with the 50 series, where the 5090 is $1,000 more than the 5080 MSRP. So even if they price $1,400 5080s, well, if the 5090 starts at $2,000, you're really not getting that kind of issue that you had last time around, where it's like, well, $1,400 for a 4080, might as well buy a 4090. You see, we're in a little bit of a different world here. I'm hoping that buyers will still reject the overpriced models, and that will end up forcing the MSRP to be honored a little bit better. But then if we get hit with 100% tariffs, there just won't be anything for $1,000. But we're not there yet, right? That hasn't happened, and we're not getting those imported versions yet, even once they do happen. Now, if you're thinking about going Team Red, but you've seen the headlines like this saying AMD initially planned Radeon RX 9070 XT for $900 and the 9070 non-XT for $750, according to a Bulgarian retailer, we have a direct reply to that from AMD's Frank Azor saying, while we aren't going to comment on all the price rumors, I can say that a $900 USD starting price point was never part of the plan. Now, does that mean they did consider $850? We don't know. But the point is, AMD has delayed the launch of their 90 series, although that's technically incorrect. AMD just officially announced Q1 availability, but there's a lot of evidence they originally planned for late January. There was even an ad campaign that went up in late January for their 90 series that had probably been set in place before they decided not to launch in January. There was a lot of retailers with a whole bunch of stock who seemed to be expecting availability in late January, and then suddenly we got, nope, it's coming in March. So why did that happen? Well, one speculation is that they want to adjust pricing based on what Nvidia is doing. What exactly their original plans were, we don't know. But the other information seems to be that they really want their software, especially FSR 4, to be ready. This is David McAfee talking about the March release date. He was also the source of the March release date, saying, I really appreciate the excitement for RDNA4. We are focused on ensuring we deliver a great set of products with Radeon 9000 series. We are taking a little extra time to optimize the software stack for maximum performance and enable more FSR 4 titles. There's the big deal. We also have a wide range of partners launching, building up stock, all of that. Anyway, the big thing here is FSR 4. Now, I think it's absolutely critical that AMD has not just an FSR 4 that works well, but one that has a lot of launch titles. But it does really need to work well. I can't stress this enough, and I might even do a separate video that FSR 4 is absolutely everything for the 9000 series, in my opinion. Because, for example, Nvidia's DLSS 4 transformer model is getting multiple reviews now, including my own, and it's looking really good. There's a lot of examples where the performance mode is often looking as good as the old quality mode. What does that mean? Well, it means you can get a lot more performance in actual use while still having a good image quality. And because of that, it means that, well, if you're deciding whether to buy an Nvidia or an AMD GPU, there is the raw power argument. But an upscaler isn't frame generation. It's not fake frames in the sense that it doesn't boost responsiveness. Like upscaling really does make the game more performant by lowering the internal rendering resolution. And as long as the output image is good, then you really are getting your game to perform better. So FSR had been lagging behind, and if you look at the current version of FSR, before we get FSR 4, up against the new transformer model, it's not pretty, especially if you look at performance mode against performance mode. So I think it's absolutely critical that FSR 4 maybe isn't as good as DLSS 4, but it needs to at least be in the conversation and usable. We had a really good showing of it at CES, but it was labeled as an AMD research project. And that doesn't inspire confidence that it was ready for a January launch, which I think is probably the main reason, in addition to pricing and all of that, for this wait on the 9000 series. They want to react to what Nvidia does with pricing and performance, but they also want FSR 4 to actually be working. Now, in terms of being available in a whole bunch of titles, one nice thing is that FSR 3.1 titles should be able to automatically run FSR 4 through the driver for RDNA4 GPUs. This was hinted at with the slide mentioning an upgrade feature for FSR 4 with an FSR 3.1 available in games that FSR 3.1 is already integrated into. This has been confirmed by a GPU leaker, Kepler, saying the RDNA4 driver replaces FSR 3.1 DLL with FSR 4, which is exactly what this sounded like already from AMD. Now that's great, because that means any game with FSR 3.1 has that FSR 4 support, but unfortunately, just FSR 3 games won't get that, because originally FSR upgrades were not as simple as a DLL swap the way Nvidia has been doing it. A lot of people switch out newer DLSS models by swapping out the DLL. That's pretty common. FSR just wasn't implemented in that kind of packaging until FSR 3.1. So that's where that's going to happen. Now, this is kind of a just wish list, not really speculation on what I think AMD will do, but something that would be awesome. Is there any way AMD could, at the driver level, take games' DLSS implementations and somehow basically do the FSR mod, right? There's a lot of mods that will mod in FSR support into games that only have DLSS support and vice versa. Is there any way AMD could try to get something like that working at the driver level? Because that would be really cool if you could basically just use FSR 4 in any game that had DLSS support. I'm not a graphics programmer to the point where I know how feasible that would be, but AMD has been very interested in doing driver level features. So maybe it's something they would look into, I don't know. But what we do know is that AMD has officially said that FSR 4 is being targeted at RDNA4, not for current GPUs, but that they're interested in bringing it to older GPUs. Well, we have now got a look at an FSR 4 DLL file, and it definitely points to this only being for RDNA4, especially because it's looking like it runs on FP8 when you look at the actual files here. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but everything I've seen reporting on this is that the RDNA3 and especially RDNA2 architectures are not going to be as good at FP8 calculations as RDNA4. So if that's the design, it could take some serious work to get it running on older architectures, especially RDNA2. But maybe RDNA3 would be a little bit more possible. That would be like 7000 series cards. But really the question with these upscalers is part of its performance. It's not just image quality, it's also performance. We're seeing that same conversation happening with DLSS 4, for example. Because with their new transformer model, like I think this is Tech Power Up's testing for performance, you can see that it's the transformer model is a little bit less performant on like an RTX 3060, for example, than the older CNN model. But that doesn't mean it's not performant enough, but there is a bit of a performance hit there, right? Now we could see, if we see a more extreme difference for FSR 4 on their older cards, that's where that could be an issue. Because remember, the whole point of upscaling is to boost performance. But if the frame time cost of computing the upscaling is too big, then turning it on won't really boost performance. You'll just lower resolution, but then eat up anything you gained by the upscale itself, right? So performance is a pretty crucial part of how these work. Now, one place where AMD is advertising something kind of impressive sounding, but we'll have to see if it ends up actually playing out in independent testing, is that their integrated graphics Strix Halo, new high-end for laptops, can apparently beat an RTX 4070 laptop GPU by up to 68%. Now, the word up to is instantly marketing speak. It's not 68% average, and also it's important that they're saying that this is happening at the same TDP. So in other words, it's not a full power RTX 4070 laptop. Laptops can have all sorts of power and thermal constraints, and this is on Asus ROG Flow Z13's thermal design power, which is apparently much, much lower than what more power-hungry systems could support. Now, that being said, this is AMD's official slide on the matter. And you can see that in a lot of games, what they're really saying is that it's basically a tie in some games, but they are claiming some large advantages in a number of titles. That's pretty interesting. This is apparently native 1080p high settings, although that also says up to, but up to this frame rate or up to these settings. I hate marketing slides. AMD has had some accurate marketing slides recently, but they've also had some really misleading marketing slides recently. But I am extremely interested in what independent testing will show for this Strix Halo product. I don't know if I'll be able to get one on the channel or not to test out, but I am interested in it. Now, in that desktop space, though, it really does seem like AMD is more focused on APUs rather than discrete laptop GPUs. AMD has confirmed that their 9000 RDNA4 GPUs, for example, are focused on desktop, not on laptops. Here's the direct quote. I'm seeing this report at videocards.com, but the original source is Notebook Check. They're saying to Notebook Check and asking the question, do you see prospects for RDNA4 laptops going forward? Unfortunately, the number of AMD GPU-based laptop SKUs has been pretty anemic, and the direct quote from Ben Conrad, AMD's Director of Product Management for Premier Mobile Client, is, our current graphic strategy is focused on the desktop market with RDNA4. So I think you'll see those types of products first in the future. He says first. Certainly, RDNA4 and future graphics technologies will make it into mobile, whether they be on APUs or future products. So again, really not necessarily confirming there'll be any discrete laptop GPUs from RDNA4, but they're not saying it's impossible, but definitely focusing on more of the APU side of things. Now, let's take a look at this, because if you're wondering, okay, but what about Intel Battlemage? Well, Thomas Goronsky on Twitter is reporting that there is a hint of new Battlemage products with new Battlemage IDs being spotted. So could be incoming, but we really don't know anything about them. I have a little bit of a concern about higher-end Intel Arc products for GPUs, because we've seen a bit of the CPU overhead issue on their B580 and B570. However, if you're running at low frame rates, you're less likely to run into a CPU bottleneck. However, on higher-end GPUs that might be hitting higher frame rates, you might be more likely to run into and expose CPU limitations caused by that driver overhead. Now, at the same time, higher-end GPUs might be paired with a higher-end CPU, but still higher frame rates tend to uncover CPU bottlenecks a little bit more. So something to think about when looking at that. Now we're getting reports that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle will be getting a native DLSS4 multi-frame generation implementation. A lot of other games will require a driver level override through the Nvidia app, rather than having it be integrated natively into the game's UI. And they'll also be getting an RTX Hair update with a February update. Interesting. I mean, the marketing slide certainly looks good, but we'll have to see what comes of that in actual use and testing, and what's the performance cost and all of that. And last thing I'll leave you with is we do have Rise of the Ronin from Team Ninja launching on PC on March 11th. And we got some PC information available, including some system requirements. It's not a huge chart, it's just like minimum and recommended, but we are getting specific notes of 8K support, 120 FPS support, FSR and DLSS support. I'm a little concerned with 120 FPS support, maybe indicating that that will be the maximum refresh rate. It could be capped at 120, like we just saw in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where you have to mod the game if you want to get rid of the frame rate cap. As far as the specific system requirements go, it's looking like for minimum, they're only asking for a GTX 1060 or a Radeon RX 5500 XT, although they are specifying at least 6 or 8 gigabytes VRAM on those models, so not like the 3 gigabyte 1060, or I think there's a 4 gigabyte 5500 XT. But they are mentioning this is only for a 1080p 30 FPS lowest graphics settings with upscaling. So they're saying you can run the game, but it's not going to be an amazing experience. We're talking upscaled 1080p at 30 FPS lowest possible settings. But at least you can get in the door. Their recommended specs is for 1080p 60 on standard graphics settings. Not quite sure what standard would be. Maybe that's console equivalent. Who knows? But they are saying that's still upscaled. So an upscaled 1080p 60 at some sort of medium-ish graphics settings are going to require a 2080 Super or a RX 6700 XT. CPUs listed are 10600K, 5600X for recommended. That would be 60 FPS, or on the 30 FPS listings, we're seeing an i5-10400 or Ryzen 5 1600 or better for that. Anyway, that's the news I've got for you today. We will be having RTX 5080 reviews up soon. Official launch for the 5090 and 5080 is the 30th, which is 2 days from filming this video. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.